millions of men are quietly panicking in their bedrooms, driven by unregulated internet sites and a complete lack of biological education. A hidden epidemic of male performance anxiety is ruining intimacy before it even begins. Instead of focusing on their partner, men are obsessing over a fabricated scorecard. They worry about achieving massive size, completely removing all body hair, whether their circumcision status is ideal, and avoiding condoms at all costs. This mental stress triggers a biological cascade. High anxiety spikes cortisol, which physically constricts blood flow. That inevitably leads to premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction. What starts as psychological pressure quickly becomes a physical failure that frustrates both partners. Performance anxiety often stems from a mismatch between choreographed internet intimacy, visually exaggerated for a lens, and the tactile, unedited reality of the human body. The body is not built to operate like a movie set. Physical compatibility functions through anatomical precision and balanced chemistry. When we look at the actual mechanics of human bodies, pop culture aesthetics become irrelevant to the sensation of the body. To understand intimacy, we have to look at the human body as a mechanical system, governed by friction, and the exterior skin is where those mechanical rules apply first. This abstract diagram illustrates the skin layers of the male anatomy. For circumcised men, the head is constantly exposed to air and clothing. Because of this contact, the top layer physically hardens. This reduces sensitivity, increasing stamina by slowing nerve signals. Conversely, an intact foreskin creates an enclosed structure. The skin underneath remains hypersensitive because it is protected from friction. However, this environment requires diligent hygiene. Without it, trapped biological buildup causes severe inflammation, leading to extreme hypersensitivity and a drastic reduction in stamina. Friction mechanics also explain why the modern grooming trend of completely removing all pubic hair actually works against human biology. High skin-to-skin friction generates immense localized heat and drag. Without a buffer, that aggressive rubbing results in micro tears, small cuts, and painful localized injuries for both partners. Biologically, pubic hair evolved to serve as a natural glide buffer. It allows two surfaces to slide past one another smoothly. For mechanical efficiency, basic trimming with a guard is scientifically superior to a clean shave. Modifying the body's natural friction barriers purely for a clean aesthetic often causes mechanical damage, making the experience worse for everyone involved. Moving past external friction, the internal anatomy addresses the most pervasive anxiety of all, the physical size myth. This clinical cross-section diagram shows the actual physical reality of the female reproductive tract. Mapping out the nerve endings responsible for physical pleasure reveals the highest concentration is located strictly in the first 2 to 2.5 inches of the canal. As the vector line pushes deeper into the diagram, past that initial 2.5-inch zone, the data registers a flat line. Biologically, penetrating deeper than this shallow zone does not result in any increase in physical pleasure. The nerve density simply isn't there. The demand for maximum depth originates from the adult film industry. Producers specifically cast for exaggerated proportions because it reads clearly on a wide camera angle, not because it provides a better physical experience.
Physiological pleasure relies on targeting specific, shallow anatomical zones. Chasing excessive physical size is biologically irrelevant to actual compatibility. Beyond the mechanical structure, a successful physical connection relies heavily on internal chemistry, specifically the biological drivers of stamina and safety. Stamina requires high testosterone and low cortisol. Chronic stress spikes cortisol, which inhibits blood flow. Pure Himalayan shilajit contains fulvic acid and over 80 minerals that help regulate the endocrine system, naturally lowering cortisol levels to allow testosterone to function effectively and improve overall stamina. But prioritizing the male ego or incorrectly sizing a condom often leads couples to skip physical protection entirely. This forces the female partner's internal chemistry to bear the entire burden of safety. This continuous wave graph tracks a stable female hormone cycle. When couples rely on emergency contraceptive pills as a substitute for condoms, it introduces a violent chemical shock to her system, represented by these jagged spikes. Zooming out, the compounding effects of these repeated hormonal shocks become clear. The baseline cycle destabilizes and flattens out, directly triggering severe long-term fertility issues and internal biological chaos. Properly sized, ultra-thin condoms function as biological shields. They protect the delicate hormonal ecosystem of the female partner while preventing the transmission of disease. Ignoring chemical safety and ditching physical barriers creates systemic, lasting biological damage to the female partner. Human intimacy relies on 3 biological realities: the 2-inch depth reality, the use of natural hair as a friction buffer, and a chemically safe environment maintained through protection. Replacing internet myths with anatomical data recalibrates expectations. When a man understands that pleasure is localized and friction is a mechanical necessity, the psychological pressure to meet impossible standards begins to subside. Real compatibility is built on mutual understanding, diligent hygiene, and a strict respect for mechanical limits. It means prioritizing your partner's actual anatomy over an impossible, screen-tested aesthetic. Stop fighting human biology. Communicate openly. Respect the physical realities of the body. And let your natural anatomy function exactly as it was designed to. Millions of men are quietly panicking in their bedrooms, driven by unregulated internet sites and a complete lack of biological education. A hidden epidemic of male performance anxiety is ruining intimacy before it even begins. Instead of focusing on their partner, men are obsessing over a fabricated scorecard. They worry about achieving massive size, completely removing all body hair, whether their circumcision status is ideal, and avoiding condoms at all costs. This mental stress triggers a biological cascade. High anxiety spikes cortisol, which physically constricts blood flow. That inevitably